I want to tell you about something that took me years to understand. Something so simple you might dismiss it, but so powerful it changed everything. There was a woman who came to me once, desperate. She had nothing. Her husband had left, her money was gone, and she was about to lose her home. She looked at me with hollow eyes and said, "Mrs. Shinn, I've tried everything. Prayer doesn't work. Affirmations don't work. Nothing works." And I looked at her, really looked at her, and I said, "Darling, you haven't tried everything, because you haven't tried speaking as if it's already done." She blinked at me. "What do you mean?" "You've been begging," I said. "You've been pleading. You've been asking God to, maybe, possibly, if He has time, help you. But you haven't once stood in the truth of what you desire and declared it finished." And right there, in my little room, I taught her something that would change her life in 30 seconds. Not 30 days, not 30 hours, 30 seconds. Within 3 weeks, money came to her from a source she'd forgotten existed. Within 2 months, she met a man who cherished her in ways her first husband never had. Within 6 months, she owned a home twice as beautiful as the one she'd feared losing. Magic? No. Miracles? Perhaps. But really, it was something much simpler and much more profound. It was the understanding that your word is your wand. And how you speak in just 30 seconds can unlock doors that years of struggle kept sealed shut. I'm going to share this ritual with you today. But first, you need to understand why it works. Because if you don't understand the why, you'll do it once or twice, and then abandon it when your logical mind starts arguing. And your logical mind will argue. It always does. Your rational mind will say, "This is ridiculous. You're sitting here speaking words into thin air while your bank account hasn't changed. While the diagnosis is still on the medical report, while that person still hasn't called." And that's when most people quit. They dip their toe into this water, feel how cold it is, and run back to the familiar shore of worry and complaining. Because complaining, at least, feels honest. It feels real. It matches what you see. But here's what I need you to understand. Your outer world is always showing you an old photograph. Always. What you see today in your circumstances was developed in the darkroom of your consciousness weeks, months, sometimes years ago. You're looking at yesterday's thoughts made visible. So when you speak your word today, you're not denying what you see. You're simply refusing to keep developing more of the same photographs. You're changing what you're feeding into the machine. I worked with a woman once, let me tell you about her, because her story illustrates this perfectly. She came to me in absolute financial terror. Not just worry. Terror. She had $30 to her name, rent due in a week, no job prospects, and a young daughter to feed. Every cell in her body wanted to panic. Every logical voice in her head screamed that she should be figuring out who to borrow from, what to pawn, where to beg. But instead, I taught her to speak this simple statement: "God is my unfailing supply, and large sums of money come to me quickly, under grace, in perfect ways." She looked at me like I'd lost my senses. "Florence," she said, "I need rent money, not poetry." I told her, "Speak it anyway. Speak it especially because it seems impossible. Speak it until something in you shifts." And she did, not once, not twice. She spoke this statement dozens of times a day, while washing dishes, while walking her daughter to school, before sleeping, upon waking. Each repetition was a seed planted in the garden of her consciousness. And here's what happened: what times, always times happens when you faithfully tend that garden. Within 3 weeks, her husband came home with news of a promotion he hadn't even applied for. The increased salary covered exactly what they needed. But that wasn't all. A week later, an old friend called unexpectedly, someone she hadn't spoken to in years, offering her freelance work that fit perfectly around her children's schedule. Now, some would call this coincidence. Others might say she was just lucky. But you and I know better. This was the law in action. She changed her inner conversations, and the universe rearranged itself to match. I want you to understand something crucial here. The words themselves aren't magic incantations. You're not casting spells. What you're doing is far more powerful than that. Your time's retraining your consciousness asterisk. You're creating new neural pathways. You're teaching your subconscious mind a new language, the language of abundance rather than lack, of possibility rather than limitation. Your subconscious mind is like the most faithful servant you'll ever have. It doesn't judge your instructions. It doesn't argue with you. It simply says, "Yes, master," and gets to work manifesting whatever you've impressed upon it. But here's the thing, it's already times working for you. Right now, this very moment. The question is, what have you been telling it? If you've been saying, "I never have enough," your subconscious nods and says, "Not enough it is." If you've been saying, "Things never work out for me," your faithful servant responds, "As you wish, difficulty and disappointment coming right up." It doesn't mean to hurt you, it's simply following orders. But when you consciously, deliberately change those orders, when you begin affirming, "I am always provided for," or "The universe arranges itself in my favor," something extraordinary happens. Your subconscious mind receives new instructions. And because it's connected to the infinite intelligence that runs this entire universe, it begins pulling strings you didn't even know existed. I've watched this transformation happen countless times. A woman came to me once, utterly defeated. She'd been out of work for months, and everywhere she turned, doors slammed in her face. Her mind was saturated with defeat. Every thought was, "There's nothing for me. I'm too old. I'm not qualified enough." I said to her, "Your words are your wands. You're conjuring your own rejection." She looked at me like I'd spoken in tongues. But desperation makes students of us all. She agreed to change her inner speech. Every morning, every night, she began affirming, "My perfect work manifests now in a perfect way. I am guided to my right place, with the right people, at the right compensation." Within 2 weeks, she received a call from a company she'd applied to 6 months prior. They'd kept her application. Something had shifted in their needs, and suddenly, she was exactly what they wanted. Better salary than she'd even asked for. Coincidence? I don't believe in coincidences anymore. I believe in laws. Spiritual laws as precise as gravity. You see, the universe doesn't hear your excuses. It doesn't care about your logic or your realistic assessments. It only responds to the vibration you're emitting. And your words, your thoughts, they create that vibration. This is why complaining is so dangerous. When you complain, you're placing an order for more things to complain about. You're telling the universe, "Yes, more of this, please. I'd like extra suffering with a side of frustration." And the universe, being the perfect waiter that it is, says, "Right away, sir, coming right up." Now, I want you to understand something crucial. When you complain, you're not just making noise. You're not just venting or getting it off your chest. You're actively creating. You're speaking things into existence. Every word you speak is a seed planted in the garden of your experience. And here's what most people don't realize. The universe doesn't distinguish between what you want and what you're giving attention to. It only knows what you're focusing on. It's like a search engine that returns results based on your query. If you keep typing in, "Why is everything terrible?" you're going to get pages and pages of terrible results. I've watched people complain themselves right out of opportunities, right out of relationships, right out of health and prosperity. They wonder why their lives never change, but they're repeating the same story every single day. "I never have enough money. People always let me down. Nothing ever works out for me." And then they're shocked, absolutely shocked when that becomes their reality. You see, your words are not passive. They're creative. They're containers of power. The Bible tells us that life and death are in the power of the tongue. Not suggestion, not influence. Power. When you speak, you're commanding your subconscious mind. You're giving instructions to the infinite intelligence within you. Let me give you a practical example. I knew a woman who constantly complained about her job. Every morning, same story. "I hate this place. My boss is impossible. I'm so miserable." She did this for months. And you know what happened? She got exactly what she kept, declaring more reasons to hate her job. Her boss became more difficult. Her workload increased. The atmosphere grew more toxic. But here's the interesting part. When I finally convinced her to stop complaining and start affirming, "I am divinely guided to my perfect opportunity," everything shifted. Within 3 weeks, a former colleague called her about a position she didn't even know existed. Perfect conditions, better pay, wonderful people. Same woman, different words, different reality. This is not coincidence. This is law. This is how the universe operates. You cannot keep speaking poverty and expect prosperity. You cannot keep declaring sickness and expect health. You cannot keep affirming limitation and expect abundance. Your words are setting the mold, and life is pouring the concrete. Once it hardens, you're living in the structure you've spoken into existence. I remember a woman who came to me, exhausted, depleted, barely holding on. She'd been telling everyone who would listen how tired she was. I'm so tired. I'm always tired. I don't know why I'm so tired. Day after day, week after week, year after year. And her body, faithful servant that it is, kept delivering exactly what she ordered. More tiredness. Deeper exhaustion. Because the subconscious mind doesn't argue. It doesn't say, "Are you sure you want to be tired?" It simply says, "Your wish is my command." So I told her what I'm telling you now. Stop ordering what you don't want. She resisted at first. "But I am tired," she said. "Isn't it dishonest to say I'm not?" And here's where most people get confused. I'm not asking you to lie. I'm asking you to stop rehearsing the problem and start declaring the solution. There's a difference between acknowledging what is and giving it a throne in your consciousness. She began to change her words. Instead of "I'm so tired," she started saying, "I am renewed with divine energy." At first, it felt like a lie. But she persisted. And something remarkable happened. Within weeks, the exhaustion began to lift. Not because the words were magic, but because she stopped feeding the condition with her attention, her emotion, and her vocal agreement. Your words are either building or demolishing. There is no neutral territory. When you say, "I can't afford it," you're building a wall between you and abundance. When you say, "I never get a break," you're constructing a prison. When you say, "Nobody appreciates me," you're signing up for invisibility. And before you protest, before you say, "But it's true," let me ask you this. How is defending your limitations serving you? What prize do you win for being right about your struggle? The universe doesn't care about your evidence. It doesn't care how many receipts you've saved, how many screenshots you've taken of people leaving you on red, how many times you've been overlooked for the promotion. The universe only cares about the frequency you're broadcasting. And here's what trips people up. They think being aware of their negative patterns means they've transcended them. They think saying, "I know I have a scarcity mindset," but gives them a free pass to keep operating from scarcity. It doesn't. Awareness without transformation is just sophisticated suffering. You ever notice how some people can tell you their entire psychological profile, name all their trauma responses, explain their attachment style in clinical detail, and yet nothing in their life changes? That's because they've made their wounds into an identity. They've turned their sob story into their brand. And the universe says, "Okay, you want to be the wounded one? Here's more evidence to support that role." Let me be clear. I'm not dismissing your pain. I'm not saying your struggles aren't real. What I'm saying is that rehearsing them, defending them, building altars to them, that's not healing. That's loyalty to suffering. And you don't owe your suffering loyalty. Every time you say something about yourself, you're giving orders to the universe. You're not just describing reality, you're prescribing it. You're writing the next scene. And most people are unknowingly writing the same painful scene over and over, then wondering why their life feels like a rerun of a show they hate. So what do you do instead? You stop arguing for your limitations. You stop collecting evidence for your unworthiness. You stop bonding with people over shared complaints, because that's not connection, that's mutual energetic imprisonment. You start speaking as if the thing you want is already true. Not as delusion, but as spiritual technology. Not fake it till you make it, embody it until it materializes. You understand. This is why silent affirmations rarely work. Why whispering in your head changes nothing. Words spoken aloud carry vibration. They move air, they reshape matter. Even physics knows this. Sound waves physically alter particles. Your voice is not decoration, it is construction. So you begin speaking your word. Not timidly. Not as a question. As a statement of spiritual fact. My perfect work manifests now in perfect ways. I am surrounded by the divine selection of prosperity. My good now flows to me in avalanches of abundance. These are not hopes. They are declarations of what already exists in the invisible realm, now being called into form. And here's what most people miss. You don't speak these words to convince yourself. You speak them to command the unseen forces that are always listening, always responding. The universe doesn't care about your doubt. It only cares about your word. Like a faithful servant, it says, "Your will be done," and sets about arranging circumstances to match your decree. I've watched this work in impossible situations. A woman who declared her perfect home appeared, and 3 days later received a phone call about a property that hadn't even been listed yet. A man who spoke his word about divine compensation found a check in the mail from a forgotten source. Not coincidence, not luck, law. Absolute, immovable law responding to vibration and command. Now, let's talk about why most people's words fail. They speak their desire, yes. Then within the hour, they speak its opposite. I am prosperous, followed by, I can't afford that. I am healed, followed by describing their symptoms to 5 different people. They swing the pendulum wildly, wondering why manifestation never stabilizes. You cannot build a house while simultaneously tearing it down. This is the discipline of the watch, guarding your words as if your life depends on it because it does. Every complaint is a decree for more to complain about. Every word of lack orders more lack. Your word is your wand. You're casting spells all day long, whether you realize it or not. And most people, they're cursing themselves into poverty, sickness, and misery without even knowing it. I watched a woman once bright, capable, talented talk herself out of every opportunity that came her way. "I'm just not lucky," she'd say. "Good things never happen to me," and like clockwork, doors would slam shut. Not because the universe was against her, but because she was decreeing it so with every breath. You see, the law doesn't judge your words. It doesn't ask if you're joking or serious, if you mean it or don't. It simply obeys. It takes your word as command and rushes to fulfill it. So when you say, "I can't afford that," you've just given marching orders to the universe. When you declare, "I'm always broke," you've signed a contract with lack. When you whisper, "Nothing ever works out for me," you've slammed the door on every good thing trying to reach you. And here's what makes this even more powerful or dangerous. Your words don't just create your future, they create your present reality right now. They shape how you see, what you notice, what you attract, and what you repel. I once knew a man who constantly said, "People are always trying to cheat me," and wouldn't you know it? He encountered dishonesty everywhere he turned. Was the whole world corrupt? Or had he tuned his consciousness to the frequency of distrust, suspicion, and betrayal? His words created a filter through which he experienced every interaction. He literally couldn't see honesty when it stood right in front of him. This is why I tell you, change your words, change your world. It's not poetry, it's physics, it's spiritual law in action. Instead of, "I can't afford it," try, "I'm open to receiving abundance in unexpected ways." Instead of, "I'm so tired," declare, "Energy flows through me now." Instead of, "This always happens to me," affirm, "I expect miracles." Does it feel strange at first? Absolutely. Will your logical mind protest? Probably. But your subconscious doesn't argue, it accepts. And the law doesn't debate, it delivers. You're writing your life story with every sentence you speak. Make it a masterpiece, not a tragedy. Because here's the uncomfortable truth most won't tell you. Your words aren't just describing your reality, they're prescribing it. Every time you say, "I can't afford that," you're giving marching orders to the universe. Every time you declare, "I always get sick in winter," you're sending out an invitation to illness. You're not reporting facts, you're issuing commands. And the universe, it's the most obedient servant you'll ever have. It doesn't argue, it doesn't question. It simply says, "Your wish is my command." You say you're unlucky in love? The universe arranges circumstances to prove you right. You declare money slips through your fingers? Watch how quickly it disappears. You claim you're too old to start over? Every opportunity that could contradict that statement quietly exits through the back door. I've watched this play out 1,000 times. A woman comes to me, desperately seeking abundance, and in one breath she tells me, "I never have enough." There it is. The decree. The command that her subconscious mind and the universe are working overtime to fulfill. She's casting a spell against herself and wondering why she's cursed. Your subconscious mind is recording every word. It doesn't have a sense of humor. It doesn't understand sarcasm or exaggeration. When you joke, "I'm so broke I can't pay attention," it files that away as instruction. When you casually remark, "This weather is killing me," you've just sent a hostile message to your own body. Your subconscious is literal, loyal, and infinitely powerful. It takes your words as blueprints and gets to work constructing exactly what you described. This is why the person who constantly talks about their aches and pains has more aches and pains to talk about. This is why the one who speaks of enemies finds them around every corner. This is why whoever declares, "Nothing ever works out for me," experiences a life where things consistently fall apart. They think they're describing their circumstances. They don't realize they're creating them. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking about that one time you said something positive and it didn't happen. You affirmed prosperity and your bank account didn't magically fill. You declared health and you still caught that cold. So you decided this whole thing is nonsense, right? But let me ask you something. How many hours did you spend affirming abundance versus how many hours did you spend worrying about bills? How many minutes were devoted to declaring health compared to the time you spent complaining about symptoms? One positive statement doesn't override a lifetime of negative programming. You can't plant one seed of faith in a garden full of weeds and expect it to flourish. You must cultivate your mental garden with the same dedication a master gardener tends their prize roses. Every morning, you pull the weeds of doubt. Every evening, you water the seeds of your desires with gratitude and conviction. This isn't a single act, it's a way of life. The universe doesn't respond to your occasional positive thoughts, it responds to your dominant mental attitude. What occupies your mind most frequently? What conversations do you repeat to yourself when no one is listening? These are the true prayers that shape your reality. I've watched people attend inspirational talks, buy every book on metaphysics, memorize affirmations, and still live in lack. Why? Because they treat spiritual law like a lottery ticket. They want to make one declaration and hit the jackpot. But spiritual law operates like agriculture, not gambling. You reap what you sow, and you must sow consistently, patiently, and with unwavering faith. Your subconscious mind is listening to every word you speak, every thought you think. It doesn't judge whether these thoughts are good for you. It simply accepts them as instructions and sets about making them real. When you say, "I can never get ahead," your subconscious says, "Yes, master," and creates circumstances that match that belief. This is why you must become vigilant, not anxious, but aware. Catch yourself when you begin to rehearse limitations. Stop yourself mid-sentence when you're about to declare something you don't want. Replace it immediately with the truth you wish to experience. Someone once told me they couldn't afford to think positively because their bills were real. I said, "Your bills are real, but so is the infinite supply of the universe. Which reality do you choose to align with?" Acknowledging a problem isn't the same as making it your identity. You can say, "I currently have a financial challenge," without declaring, "I am poor and always will be." The difference is profound. One statement acknowledges a temporary condition. The other builds a prison of permanence. Your words are either building bridges to your desires or walls that keep them away from you. Every single word matters because every single word carries creative power. And here's what most people miss. There's no such thing as idle words. You might think you're just venting, just complaining, just making conversation. But every word is a seed planted in the invisible realm. Every word is a command given to the universe. Every word is shaping your tomorrow. I knew a woman who constantly joked about being broke. "I'm so poor." She'd laugh at lunch with friends. "I can't afford anything." She thought she was being funny, relatable, harmless. But within 6 months, she'd lost her job and was facing actual financial crisis. Her joke became her reality because the universe doesn't understand humor, it only understands vibration and instruction. Your casual comments are not casual at all. Your throwaway remarks are not thrown away. They're all working, creating, manifesting in the invisible before they appear in the visible. This is why you must become vigilant about every single word that leaves your lips. Think about how you talk about your body. "I'm always sick." "I look terrible." "My body is falling apart." These aren't observations, they're invitations. You're inviting illness, ugliness, and decay. You're giving your subconscious mind direct orders to create exactly what you're declaring. Now imagine speaking differently. My body is strong and healthy. I am radiating vitality. Every cell in my body is renewing itself perfectly. Can you feel the difference? One set of words drains energy, the other generates it. One destroys, the other builds. I want you to catch yourself this week. Listen to your own voice as if you were a stranger, hearing it for the first time. What are you declaring about your life? What are you prophesying about your future? What seeds are you planting with every conversation? Because here's the truth that will set you free. You can change everything by changing your words. Your circumstances don't have to change first. Your feelings don't have to shift first. You start with words. You speak the new reality into existence before you see it. This is faith made practical. You don't wait for the mountain to move before you praise. You praise while it's still standing there, blocking your path. You give thanks before the answer arrives. This is what separates those who demonstrate miracles from those who merely wish for them. I've seen people pray for prosperity while their words drip with poverty. They ask for abundance, then immediately speak of lack. They declare they're good, then spend the next hour explaining why it can't possibly come. The universe doesn't respond to your wishes. It responds to your word made firm through conviction. There was a woman who came to me drowning in debt. She could barely speak of anything else. Every conversation circled back to what she owed, what she couldn't pay, how impossible her situation had become. I told her what I'm telling you now. Stop rehearsing the problem. You've given it enough attention. You've fed it with your focus until it grew enormous in your experience. We began to change her inner conversation. Instead of, "I can't pay this," she learned to say, "All my financial obligations are met with divine supply." When the bills came, instead of panic, she would say, "God is my unfailing supply. Every need is met." It felt like lying at first. That's what she told me. She said, "Florence, I'm speaking words that aren't true." I said to her, "You're speaking words that aren't yet visible. There's a difference. You're calling those things which be not as though they were, just as the ancient text instructs." Within 3 months, money came from directions she'd never anticipated. An old forgotten account, an unexpected opportunity, a gift from a relative. Not because she manipulated anything, but because she stopped blocking her good with her own contradictory speech. She stopped being at war with herself. This is the work, not controlling outcomes, but controlling your word. Not forcing doors, but keeping your inner speech aligned with what you claim to desire. Most people sabotage their prayers before breakfast. They declare their intention, then spend the day explaining why it won't work. Your subconscious is always listening. It doesn't judge your words. It doesn't debate with you. It simply accepts what you repeatedly impress upon it and works to make that your reality. If you constantly speak of struggle, your subconscious says, "Understood, struggle it is." It's utterly obedient to your dominant inner conversation. So what does this mean for you today, right now, as you listen to these words? It means you must become fiercely aware of what you're saying to yourself and about yourself. Every complaint is a prayer for more of what you don't want. Every time you say, "I never have enough," you're instructing that faithful servant within to deliver lack. When you say, "People always disappoint me," you're creating a magnet for disappointment. I watched a woman transform her entire financial situation, not by working harder, not by getting another degree, but by changing one phrase. She stopped saying, "I can't afford it," and started saying, "I choose to use my resources differently." That small shift acknowledged abundance rather than lack. Within months, opportunities began appearing that had always been there, but she'd been blind to them because her inner conversation had programmed her to see only limitation. Your subconscious doesn't argue. It doesn't say, "Are you sure about that?" It simply says, "Your wish is my command." This is why affirmations work, but only when they're spoken with feeling and persistence. You can't just mumble, "I am prosperous" twice while scrolling through bills and expect miracles. You must saturate your mind with the new thought until it becomes more real to you than your current circumstances. Think of it like this. If you planted tomato seeds but every day walk through your garden saying, "Nothing's growing, this is hopeless, I'll never have tomatoes," what would happen? The seeds would still grow, because that's their nature. But your negative attention might cause you to neglect watering, to miss the first sprouts, to give up entirely. Your words don't change the seed, but they change you, the gardener. They change what you notice, what you nurture, what you allow to flourish. Your inner conversation is the garden you tend every single day. What are you planting there? What are you watering with your attention? Because here's what most people don't realize. The universe doesn't judge the content of your thoughts. It doesn't say, oh, this person is worried, so I'll withhold the good. No. It simply says, this is what you're focusing on. This must be what you want more of. And it delivers. You worry about lack. You get experiences that confirm lack. You speak words of limitation. You build walls around your own expansion. It's mechanical. It's law. And the most beautiful part? Once you understand this, once you really get it in your bones, you hold the master key. I've watched person after person transform their entire reality by doing nothing more than changing their inner speech. A woman who couldn't find work, who had been rejected dozens of times, started saying to herself, I am wanted, I am valued. The perfect position seeks me out, not as a desperate plea, but as a statement of truth. Within 2 weeks, an opportunity appeared that hadn't even existed before. The position was created for her. Coincidence? I don't believe in coincidences anymore. I believe in alignment. Your words are not just sounds that disappear into the air. They are seeds with roots that go deep into the invisible substance that surrounds you. They are commands given to the creative force that is always listening, always responding, always saying yes. So what are you commanding? When you say, I can't afford that, you're not just stating a fact. You're giving an order to the universe to keep it that way. When you say, I always struggle, you're not just venting, you're commissioning more struggle. When you say, nothing ever works out for me, you're not being realistic. You're being creative. You're creating that exact experience. And the opposite is just as true. When you say, I am surrounded by opportunity, you attune yourself to see the doors that were always there. When you say, I am guided and protected, you relax into a flow that carries you forward. When you say, abundance is my natural state, you stop blocking the channels through which good was trying to reach you all along. This isn't about lying to yourself. This is about telling yourself a higher truth, the truth of what's possible, the truth of who you really are beneath the layers of conditioning and fear. When you speak this way, when you choose words that reflect wholeness rather than brokenness, you're not denying reality. You're choosing which reality you're going to feed. Because here's the thing, both exist simultaneously. The version of you that's struggling and the version of you that's triumphant, they're both real. They're both available to you right now. The question is, which one are you giving your attention? Which one are you speaking into existence? I've watched people transform their entire lives simply by changing the conversation they have with themselves, not through gritting their teeth, not through forced positivity, but through a quiet, steady commitment to speak to themselves as they would speak to someone they deeply love and believe in. You wouldn't look at a child learning to walk and say, you're pathetic, you'll never get this, you're fundamentally broken. You'd say, you're doing it. Look at you, you're learning, you're getting stronger every single day. Yet somehow, when it comes to ourselves, we think cruelty is honesty and encouragement is delusion. Your words create the emotional weather you live in. When you speak harshly to yourself, you create an internal storm, a constant state of threat and defensiveness. Your nervous system responds accordingly. Stress hormones flood your body. Your perception narrows. You literally cannot see opportunities and possibilities that are right in front of you because your brain is in survival mode. But when you speak with kindness and possibility, when you say, I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm becoming, you create an internal climate of safety. Your nervous system relaxes. Your perception expands. Suddenly, you notice the door that was always there. The conversation you needed to have becomes obvious. The solution appears not because it's new, but because you can finally see it. This isn't about lying to yourself. It's about learning to see the whole truth, not just the part that your fear wants to emphasize. Yes, you made a mistake. And you're also capable of learning from it. Yes, you're facing a challenge. And you're also resilient and resourceful. Both are true, but only one moves you forward. Your words are the bridge between where you are and where you're going. They're the vehicle that carries you from one state of being to another. Choose them as carefully as you would choose the person who's driving you across a treacherous mountain pass. Choose them knowing that they have power, real power. the power to shape your reality from the inside out. Every morning, you wake up with a clean slate. The universe doesn't carry grudges. It doesn't remember yesterday's doubts or last week's fears. It responds to what you are, times now, asterisk, to what you're claiming, times now, asterisk. So claim something beautiful. I knew a woman who had suffered terrible health for years. Doctors had given her every diagnosis under the sun. She carried prescriptions like badges of her suffering. And then one day, she heard something that changed everything. She heard that her words were creating her experience. At first, she was angry. You mean I did this to myself? No. She didn't do it times to times herself. She simply didn't know she had the power to do differently. But now she did. And with that knowledge came responsibility. Beautiful, liberating responsibility. She started small. Every morning, she would say, I am whole, perfect, strong, powerful, loving, harmonious, and happy. She said it even when her body screamed the opposite. She said it when the pain was intense. She said it because she understood something profound. She was not describing what was, she was declaring what would be. 3 months later, her symptoms began to shift. 6 months later, doctors were baffled. A year later, she was unrecognizable. Not because of a miracle drug or a special treatment, but because she changed the inner conversation. She stopped agreeing with disease and started insisting on wholeness. The body listens. Oh, how the body listens. Every cell is eavesdropping on your thoughts, taking orders from your words. When you say, I'm exhausted, your cells salute and comply. When you say, I'm vibrantly alive, they reorganize around that truth instead. This isn't denial, this is direction. You're not pretending problems don't exist, you're refusing to give them the final word. You're exercising your divine authority to call forth what you truly desire. And here's what makes this so powerful. The universe doesn't argue. It doesn't say, well, let me check your track record first. It doesn't review your past failures or question your worthiness. It simply says, yes, as you speak, so shall it be. That's the law, impersonal, unwavering, available to everyone. So speak life. Speak abundance. Speak love. Not someday. Not when conditions improve. Now. Right now. With this breath and the next. The universe doesn't ask for your credentials. It doesn't check your bank account or your resume. It responds to your consciousness, to the vibrational frequency you're broadcasting every moment of every day. And here's what most people misunderstand. They think they need to feel worthy first, asterisk, then times they can claim they're good. They're waiting for some external validation, some permission slip from life itself. But that's backwards. You claim it first. You decide first. You step into the consciousness of having it times now asterisk, and the universe must respond. I've watched this play out in the most remarkable ways. A woman came to me once, drowning in debt, afraid to open her mail. She'd been affirming poverty for years without realizing it. I can't afford that. Money never stays with me. I'm just not good with finances. Every word was a decree, an order to the universe to keep her exactly where she was. I told her, stop reporting on the old conditions. Start announcing the new ones. She looked at me like I'd suggested she sprout wings and fly, but she began. She started saying, money flows to me easily and constantly. I am a perfect channel for infinite abundance. She said it in the morning. She said it when the bills came. She said it when her mind screamed that she was lying to herself. And something shifted. Not overnight, but faster than logic would suggest. A forgotten refund arrived. A neighbor offered her work. An old debt was forgiven. One by one, doors opened. Why? Because she stopped being loyal to her lack and became loyal to her abundance instead. You see, you can't serve two masters. You can't declare abundance while nursing your stories of scarcity. You can't claim health while rehearsing every symptom. You can't call in love while replaying every rejection. The universe is listening to times, all times of it, but it responds most powerfully to whatever you're giving your passionate attention. So what are you giving your attention to? What story are you telling yourself on repeat? Because that story, whatever it is becoming your experience. Not someday. Today. Right now, as you hear these words, your consciousness is setting the mold for what comes next. You want to know the fastest way to change your life? Change your words. Change them now. Not tomorrow when you feel better. Not next week when circumstances improve. Now, interrupt the old pattern mid-sentence if you have to. Catch yourself saying, "I never have enough," and immediately replace it with, "I am abundantly supplied." Notice yourself thinking, "Nothing ever works out for me," and speak the truth instead. "Everything is always working out for my highest good." Your subconscious doesn't argue with you. It simply accepts what you persistently tell it. If you consistently redirect your words, you will absolutely redirect your life. This is not positive thinking. This is spiritual law in action. I knew a woman who had trained herself to say "cancelled" every time a fearful thought entered her mind. She would literally speak the word out loud, "cancelled." Then she would immediately replace it with the truth she wanted to manifest. At first, her family thought she'd lost her mind. But within 3 months, her entire life had transformed. The debt she thought would bury her was suddenly paid through unexpected channels. The relationship she thought was ending became stronger than ever. The health issue that terrified her resolved without medical intervention. Why? Because she stopped feeding the monster of fear with her words. She stopped watering the weeds and started watering the garden instead. You must become absolutely ruthless about this. Your words are not casual, they are creative. Every time you say, "I can't afford that," you are instructing your subconscious to maintain lack. Every time you say, "I'm so tired," you are commanding your body to produce more fatigue. Every time you say, "This always happens to me," you are guaranteeing its repetition. I'm not asking you to pretend everything is perfect when it isn't. I'm asking you to stop rehearsing the problem and start declaring the solution. There's a vast difference between acknowledging a current situation and giving it power through constant verbal reinforcement. When someone asks how you are, and things are difficult, you don't have to lie, but you also don't have to give a full inventory of everything that's wrong. You can say, "I'm in transition," or "I'm watching something wonderful unfold," or simply, "I'm grateful." These statements honor your integrity while refusing to cement the temporary into permanence. Your words today are building your tomorrow. Every single one. If you could see in the spiritual realm what your words are constructing, you would become very selective, very quickly. You would guard your mouth as if your life depended on it, because it does. The physical world is simply the outer court of the temple. It's where the invisible becomes visible. It's where your consciousness takes form. And here's what most people don't understand. You cannot change the form without first changing the consciousness that created it. You can rearrange your furniture, change your job, move to a new city, even find a new partner. But if you haven't changed your inner dialogue, you'll simply recreate the same patterns in a different setting. The woman who says, "Men are unreliable," will attract unreliable men in every zip code. The man who says, "Money slips through my fingers," will be broke in Beverly Hills, just as surely as he was broke in his hometown. This is why affirmations fail for so many people. They stand in front of the mirror and say, "I am prosperous, I am prosperous," while inside, a voice is screaming, "This is ridiculous, you're broke, look at your bank account." You cannot talk yourself into believing something your heart knows you don't accept. The universe responds to conviction, not repetition. But when you speak with belief, that's when heaven and earth move. When you say, "God is my source," and you feel the truth of it resonate through your entire being, you've just issued a decree in the spiritual realm. When you say, "I walk by faith, not by sight," and you mean it with every fiber, you've just announced your independence from appearances. I knew a man who was facing bankruptcy. His business had failed, his debts were mounting, and everyone around him was preparing for his collapse. But this man had understanding. He refused to speak of failure. When people asked how things were going, he would smile and say, "Something wonderful is happening to me." He said it again and again, not from desperation, but from faith. His friends thought he'd lost his mind. They said he was denying reality. But he understood something they didn't. He was busy creating a new reality. Within 6 months, an unexpected opportunity arrived. Within a year, he had rebuilt everything and more. He spoke his world into being. Now, I'm not talking about lying or pretending. I'm talking about aligning your words with the truth of the spiritual realm, rather than the temporary conditions of the material world. There's a vast difference between denial and spiritual vision. Let me give you a practical way to understand this distinction. When you have a cold and someone asks how you're feeling, denial would be saying, "I don't have a cold," while you're sneezing and coughing. That's foolishness. But spiritual vision says, "I'm moving toward perfect health. I see myself well and vital." You're acknowledging where you are while speaking toward where you're going. Your word is the bridge between the invisible and the visible. It's the vehicle through which spiritual substance takes form in your material experience. This is why the ancients placed such tremendous emphasis on the power of blessing and curse. They understood that words weren't just sounds, they were creative forces that shaped destiny. I've watched people literally talk themselves into poverty. They meet a friend and immediately begin rehearsing their financial difficulties. "Times are so hard, I can barely make ends meet. I don't know how I'll pay next month's rent." And they wonder why their financial situation never improves. They're using the most powerful creative force in their possession to perpetuate the very condition they claim to want to escape. The universe doesn't argue with you. It doesn't say, "Now wait, you don't really mean that." It simply says, "Your word is law in your life. As you decree, so shall it be." You are the architect of your own experience through the blueprints you draw with your words. Here's something that might surprise you. Your casual, thoughtless words are often more powerful than your formal affirmations. Why? Because they reveal what you truly believe in your subconscious mind. You might stand before your mirror every morning declaring, "I am prosperous and successful," but then spend your entire day saying things like, "I can't afford that. Money's tight. I'm so broke." Which statement do you think carries more weight with your subconscious? The one you repeat constantly throughout your day. This is why vigilance matters. This is why becoming a guardian of your own tongue is one of the most important spiritual disciplines you can practice. I'm not suggesting you become rigid or fearful about every word, but I am suggesting you become aware. Notice what you're saying. Notice the stories you're telling about yourself, about your life, about your possibilities. Because here's what most people don't realize. Your subconscious mind doesn't distinguish between a joke and a decree. When you say, "I'm so bad with money," even laughingly, your subconscious says, "Understood. Command received." It doesn't have a sense of humor about these things. It takes everything literally. It's like a faithful servant who carries out every order you give, without question, without judgment. So when you casually declare, "Nothing ever works out for me," your subconscious gets to work making sure that statement remains true. It will filter your perception, so you notice every disappointment and overlook every blessing. It will influence your decisions so you unconsciously sabotage opportunities, not because it hates you, but because it's trying to keep you consistent with your own declarations. This is why you must become a guardian of your words. Not in some rigid, fearful way where you're terrified of saying the wrong thing, but in a conscious, deliberate way where you understand that you are always casting your vote for the reality you want to experience. And let me tell you something else that might surprise you. The universe doesn't reward struggle. We've been taught that suffering is noble, that we must earn our good through hardship and sacrifice. But I'm here to tell you that this is one of the most destructive beliefs we carry. The universe responds to the consciousness of ease, not the consciousness of strain. Think about it. Does the apple tree struggle to produce apples? Does the rose bush agonize over creating roses? No. They simply allow the life force to move through them. They fulfill their nature effortlessly. You were designed to thrive, not to barely survive, not to scrape by, not to constantly fight and claw your way forward. You were designed to allow good to flow to you and through you as naturally as you breathe. But we've been trained to believe the opposite. We wear our exhaustion like a badge of honor. We compete over who's busier, who's more stressed, who's sacrificed the most. And all the while, we're reinforcing the belief that life must be hard, that abundance must be wrestled from a reluctant universe. What if you dropped that story entirely? What if you decided, right now, that you could receive without suffering, that you could prosper without struggle, that ease and grace were your natural state? What if the only thing between you and everything you desire is the outdated belief that you must pay for it with your peace? I've watched people cling to suffering like it's a ticket they must present at the gates of heaven, as if God is standing there with a ledger, checking off each hardship before granting admission to joy. But the universe doesn't operate on a pain for gain exchange rate. When a seed becomes a flower, Does it suffer its way into bloom? When the tide comes in, does the ocean struggle to fill the shore? There is effort, yes. There is growth, certainly. But there is no self-imposed torture masquerading as worthiness. You are designed for expansion, not for penance. Every single desire you hold is a divine assignment, not a test of how much you can endure before receiving. The fact that you want something means you are meant to have it. The longing itself is the universe tugging at your sleeve, saying, "This way, this is yours." But you've been taught to mistrust that tug, to second-guess every desire, to believe that if something feels too good, too easy, too aligned, then surely you must be doing something wrong. So you create obstacles where there are none. You manufacture delays. You convince yourself that you're not ready, not worthy, not proven. And all the while, your good is waiting. Patient, persistent, knocking at the door you refuse to open because you haven't suffered enough yet to deserve what's on the other side. Let me tell you something that might shake you awake. Your suffering does not impress the universe. It doesn't make you more spiritual. It doesn't make you more deserving. It doesn't speed up your blessings or earn you bonus points in some cosmic reward system. Your suffering only does one thing. It keeps you from receiving what's already yours. The moment you decide that ease is natural, that grace is your birthright, that you can receive simply because you exist, everything shifts. Not because the universe suddenly decides to reward you, but because you've finally stopped blocking what was always flowing toward you. I've watched people transform their entire lives, not by doing more, but by allowing more. By letting themselves be held by the same intelligence that orchestrates the seasons, that tells your heart to beat without your conscious instruction, that grows a forest from a fallen seed. You don't have to manage the universe. You just have to stop interfering with it. This is where most spiritual teachings get it backwards. They tell you to surrender, but they make surrender sound like defeat, like you're giving up. But real surrender isn't resignation. It's recognition. It's finally seeing that there's a current already moving in your favor, and you can either fight it or float with it. Think about how a tree doesn't struggle to grow. It doesn't wake up each morning and force its leaves into existence. It simply allows the life within it to express itself. You're the same. You have desires because life is trying to grow through you. Your dreams aren't arbitrary, they're directional. They're showing you where your energy wants to go. But most of us were taught to mistrust that. We were taught that if something comes easily, it doesn't count. That real achievement must hurt. That you have to earn your oxygen. So we take what should be a joyful expansion and turn it into a war. We make enemies out of our own desires. I'm telling you, you can put the weapons down. Every single thing you're chasing already exists in potential form, hovering just at the edge of manifestation, waiting for you to become the kind of person who can receive it without sabotaging it. And you become that person, not through more striving, but through more allowing, through making peace with ease, through trusting that life is for you, not against you. When you really get this, not just intellectually but in your bones, you stop performing for an invisible judge. You stop auditioning for permission to exist. You realize that your value isn't up for debate. It never was. You were born worthy, and no amount of achievement or failure changes that fundamental truth. This is what changes everything. Not a new strategy, not a better technique, but a complete reorientation to reality itself. A recognition that you're not separate from the creative power of the universe. You're an expression of it, and expressions don't have to earn the right to express. You see, we've been taught that hard work is virtuous. That struggle means you're serious. That if you're not exhausted, you haven't earned it. But these are ideas, not laws. And ideas can be changed. I've watched people torture themselves for years, pushing and forcing and grinding themselves into dust, convinced that this is what success demands. And then I've watched others flow into the same results with what looks like ease. What's the difference? Not talent. Not luck. Not privilege, though we love to tell ourselves that story. The difference is consciousness. The difference is whether you believe the universe is against you or for you. Whether you think you're swimming upstream or being carried by a current that wants you to arrive. When you try to force manifestation through sheer willpower, you're operating from a consciousness of lack. You're saying, "I don't have it, so I must make it happen." But the very energy of making it happen reinforces the not having. You cannot create abundance from a consciousness of scarcity. You cannot attract ease from a state of struggle. This doesn't mean you do nothing. It means your action comes from a different place. Not from fear or desperation, but from inspiration. Not from I have to, but from I'm moved to. There's a massive energetic difference between these two states, and the universe responds accordingly. Think of it like this. When you're inspired, you're literally in spirit. You're connected to the source of all creation. Your action is an extension of divine impulse. It flows. It feels right. Even when it's challenging, there's a quality of rightness to it. But when you're forcing, you've disconnected from that source. You're operating from the small self, the ego self, the self that believes it's alone and must muscle its way through life. And that self, no matter how determined, is working with a fraction of the power available to you. So the question becomes, how do I move from forcing to allowing? How do I shift from struggle to flow? First, you notice where you're pushing. Where are you gripping? Where does it feel heavy? Your body will tell you. Forcing has a physical signature tension, exhaustion, a sense of swimming through mud. Then you ask, what would this look like if it were easy? Not if I made it easy, but if it were inherently easy. If the universe were conspiring to help me. That question alone begins to shift your consciousness. It opens you to possibilities you couldn't see from the forcing state. And here's what I've observed. When you step back from forcing, when you release that death grip on the outcome, the universe doesn't abandon you. It rushes in to meet you. But it brings something better than what your limited mind was trying to manufacture. I've seen it happen countless times. The woman who stops desperately chasing a specific man and suddenly meets someone who actually cherishes her. The entrepreneur who releases the perfect business plan and stumbles into an opportunity 10 times more aligned with their gifts. The artist who stops trying to paint what they think will sell and creates their masterpiece. The universe is more intelligent than your anxiety. It has access to information you don't possess. It sees connections you can't perceive. It knows people you haven't met yet, opportunities that haven't manifested yet, timing you can't calculate yet. When you're in forcing mode, you're essentially telling the universe, I don't trust you. I've got to control this myself. And the universe, respecting your free will, steps back and says, all right, do it your way. And then you're alone with your limited human effort, your anxious striving, your manipulations that exhaust you and everyone around you. But when you affirm, the divine plan of my life now takes shape in definite, concrete experiences leading to my heart's desire, you're essentially saying, I'm available for something greater than I can orchestrate alone. You're opening yourself to grace, to divine timing, to synchronicity. This doesn't mean you become passive. There's a profound difference between passive and receptive. Passive is collapsed, defeated, waiting for life to happen to you. Receptive is alert, present, responsive, ready to act when the opportunity appears, but not forcing the door before it's ready to open. Think of a gardener. She doesn't stand over her seeds screaming, grow, grow faster. Why aren't you blooming yet? She plants with intention, waters with consistency, provides the right conditions, and then, this is crucial, she trusts the intelligence within the seed to unfold in its proper time. You are both the gardener and the garden. You plant your word, you tend your consciousness, you remove the weeds of doubt and fear, and then you trust the life force within you to bring forth the harvest. Now, some of you are saying, Florence, I've been affirming for weeks, months, maybe even years. Where is my demonstration? And I say to you, are you truly planting your word? Or are you merely wishing? There is a vast difference between a casual wish and the deliberate planting of the seed of faith. A wish is surface level. It says, wouldn't it be nice if? But the spoken word, planted with conviction, says, it is so, it is done. You must examine your inner garden with ruthless honesty. Are you affirming abundance while secretly expecting lack? Are you declaring perfect health while inwardly believing in the power of disease? Because your subconscious knows the truth. It reads the real conviction beneath your words. I once knew a woman who affirmed prosperity every single day, but she would not throw away her worn-out shoes. I might need them, she said. And there it was, the real belief. Not abundance, but fear of scarcity. Your subconscious was reading her actions, not her words. Your demonstration will appear when your whole being aligns, when your words, thoughts, feelings, and actions all point in the same direction. That is the moment of power. That is when the invisible becomes visible. And here is another truth that might surprise you. Sometimes your demonstration comes disguised. You ask for a new home, and what appears is an unexpected opportunity that requires you to move. You ask for prosperity, and what comes is an idea that demands your courage to pursue. You ask for love, and what arrives is a situation that calls you to first love yourself. The universe is infinitely creative. It knows 1,000 ways you do not know. So when you plant your word, release your picture of exactly how it must appear. Say, "This or something better," in God's perfect way. That phrase, "this or something better," is a demonstration of trust. It says, "I know what I desire, but I defer to infinite intelligence, which sees what I cannot see and knows what I do not know."